Hello and welcome to the Jackcast, the Swansea City podcast. I am Guto, and with me as always we have Steve Carroll. How are you, Steve?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Very good, very good. This week's podcast is a season preview. It is remarkable that we're having to do a season preview this early in the summer, but with the season kicking off in July this year, here we are. Here is your early treat for the summer. And because it's a special episode, we've got a special guest. So I would like to welcome Ian Mitchelmore from the Evening Post and Wales Online. How are you, Ian?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Guto. That's a big welcome. Special. I've never been called that before, and not in such kind terms. But no, thanks for having me on, gents. It's a pleasure to join. You're an avid listener on the road all the way on the away day. So thanks for having me on.
It's one way of passing the time on the M4, and
we've sort of spoiled it for you now, though, because obviously you're not going to listen to this on the way to Rotherham, are you?
Oh Christ, no chance. Sorry, boys. That's one less listener.
Oh gosh, that's the one gone. There we go. There we go. Today's podcast, we're going to have a quick little chat with Mitch about how the season's gone from his point of view, reporting on the club. We're then going to look ahead to the big season opener away at Rotherham, and then we will look ahead to the season as a whole and ask what we've got to expect from the next 9 months. I'm sure plenty of excitement, as always. So before we get on to that, Mitch, if it's all right with you, we'll ask you a couple of questions just about your time covering the Swans. How long have you actually been down this way now?
So my first day at Wales Online was 3rd of October 2016. And don't ask me how I remember the date, but it was the day Bob Bradley got appointed. So you tell me which was worse for Welsh football than Swansea. So... yeah, it was a crazy day. Francesco Guidolin getting the sack as I was in the lift going upstairs at Media Wales HQ, and then about 3 hours later, Bob Bradley comes in, and I wasn't a full-time reporter back then, but it was I was very much covering the Swans. Quite often I'd be doing the odd press conference here and there, games, and a bit of that. But full-time it was December 2018, so you're looking at midway through Graham Potter's season, so the first one back in the Championship really, and yeah, been full-time since then.
Fantastic. It's been an extremely interesting time to be covering our club.
Yeah, you're not wrong there, Guto. Like I say, I must admit, I don't know what you boys felt as fans, because the Premier League was a fantastic ride, but those last couple of years were tough, and that's pretty much when I came in. It was, some of the football under Paul Clement was dire to watch, and Carlos Carvalhal with his quotes. There was a bit of fun here and there, but on the whole, it was quite tough, wasn't it? Especially after the Rodgers, the Laudrup era, and even the good spells under Gary Monk and stuff as well. So to come in under Graham Potter, where there was a lot of excitement in some ways in what was a bad situation, you've seen players like DJ, Ollie McBurney, Connor Roberts, they were all getting a chance, and it was quite an exciting time. I must admit, I really enjoyed covering it, and as fans, I imagine you had days a bit like under Russell Martin, really, where there were some days that were horrible to watch and others that were brilliant. So I quite enjoyed it, and then yeah, obviously, sadly, he didn't stay as long as people hoped, but you can't begrudge him that, because he got a great opportunity with Brighton, and you see the great job he's done there now. He's a top-notch manager and a very nice guy as well. So I'm thrilled for him that he's doing so well. But it was a great time to come in. But yeah, those first couple of years in the 2016, 17, 18 was strange, to say the least, having watched from afar the early days of the Premier League and the rise of the divisions.
Yeah, sadly, I think there were similar emotions on our end as fans as well, watching that period. Much of your time as the main reporter on the Swans has coincided with the COVID-19 pandemic, which meant, of course, that you were one of the only people that was actually able to go into matches and watch the Swans. What was that whole period like for you?
Yeah, it was so strange, Guto. I mean, as fans were desperate to go, and I understand it, because, we were all the same, and we were uncertain ourselves. I remember that last game, the West Brom, the 0-0, and, then the COVID kicks in, and then, March, April, May, you still didn't know what was going on, and you were speaking to people at the club the whole time, and even they didn't know, and they're at the top of the tree. They'd know everything that's happening. So it was just so strange. Then when that first game back, it was the Middlesbrough, the 3-0 away, where Brewster scored twice, I think. And then the first home one, the Luton game, where they're absolutely terrible and lost 1-0. So it was a bit of a strange one to go back into that. And, we all know what happened at Reading, the 4-1 game. I think it was 2 years ago last week, wasn't it? an absolute travesty that fans weren't there for that. And it was just the silence, everything around it. You're turning up at the ground, there's no atmosphere, you're not allowed in the press room, you can't sort of go and speak to people in person. It was just very, very strange. It was like robotic. Everyone wants to throw you out as soon as the game's done because the COVID risk, understandably, there was so many protocols to follow. But at the end of the day, we were the lucky ones that got to go there and try and report and try and accurately reflect on what was going on. So it was just weird, I must admit. And that I remember that the Barnsley playoff semi-final last season up at Oakwell, where I think they had, was it 3,000 fans they had in, and then it was the same at the Liberty for the return leg, and it felt unbelievable. And then obviously at Wembley there was about 10,000, and that felt great. And then the game kicked in and it went downhill rapidly. But let's not go into that. But it was just bizarre. I feel for the fans having to watch on streams, and it must have been really, really, really weird. You're paying your good hard money, and full credit to the people that left their money in the club. Swansea did the best they could out of a tough situation, and the fans bought into it on the whole. I thought they were really good, but it just must have been so weird for them, more so than us, really.
Yeah. Did you feel an extra degree of pressure because you were kind of reporting, because you were the only person really that was able to go into the stadium on behalf of fans? Did you feel that you were kind of under greater pressure to kind of reflect what was going on at the club because we couldn't go anywhere near the action?
Yeah, I think you're probably all right there, Guto, because the main reason being you couldn't hear what was going on, what was being done on the dugouts. When you're watching at home on Swans TV or wherever it was, you are so limited in what you can see, and hence why I was never keen to cover matches off the telly. I was always adamant that I needed to go, and luckily I was able to do that. And the perspective you get and what you hear from the dugout, that was phenomenal. It was such a good insight. You're hearing what players on the bench were saying, and they sort of cycled where they were in the usual dugout where they are now. Whereas in COVID times, they were sat right in front of us in the press box. So, they were right in front of you. You could hear them shouting tactile things. Connor Roberts, I mean, he was just hilarious to listen to in lockdown. It was phenomenal. Every other word was an F and a Jeff. So I won't go into that too much. But the insight was just phenomenal. You hear what the coaches were saying, and even the referee conversations that you don't normally hear that with the crowd noise, even if it's a smaller ground where, maybe League Two where there's 4,000 or 5,000 in. You're talking about the Liberty and places like that where there's 15,000, 20,000, and the bigger stadiums as well. It was a massive difference. So it was refreshing to hear all of that, and that in itself gave us some nice little stories, and gave you more questions to ask the players, and Steve Cooper in particular at the time, and Russell Martin, like I say, I think he had a couple of games last season, didn't he? So but bizarre. It was just so strange, and I'd like to think that we're over all that now, but you never know. But I'd like to think that we're over the worst of it now.
God, I hope so. I really do. Last season, of course, the return of fans, but also a time of great change at Swansea City. When is it not the time of great change at Swansea City, I guess? But how did you see last season, really? What were your opinions on the campaign as a whole under Russell Martin?
Yeah, I think these are probably the wrong words to use, but it was a free hit because, Russell Martin came in on, was it August the 1st, about 6 days before that Blackburn game. And I think, were you both there at Ewood Park? It was unbelievable, wasn't it, watching that game unfold?
One of the main things I remember was in the first few seconds, I think Latterbourdier blasted the ball back to Bender, and it was nearly an own goal. And I was just thinking to myself, you can just tell this team is underprepared, and we're going to gift a couple of bad goals today. And obviously there were one or two instances like that, weren't there?
Yeah, exactly. It was just chalk and cheese from what you'd seen for the last couple of seasons, and with a couple more months, had the club have functioned as well as they should have, I think that process would have been far smoother, and he'd have had more time, and that first game wouldn't have been as bonkers as it was. And in the end, a 2-1 defeat probably flattered Swans in. Stephen Bender obviously makes a big mistake for the goal, but he made about 7 or 8 really, really top-notch saves in that game. But it was just crazy watching that game unfold, and I think the whole summer was just the way it was handled. I think the club got it badly wrong. The John Eustace situation, everything else, that was the way that unfolded was, certain aspects of that couldn't be helped. But, Russell Martin, credit to him, he did what he could with, limited time. COVID cases knackered in August, I think Flynn Downs, Carl Norton, key players got COVID and stuff. And, you just thought, when's it going to ignite? And then when it finally did ignite, I think they won 4 out of 5. The time where they won the 3-0 at home against Cardiff, Coventry away, those sort of games, and they were getting to that third game in the week, and the players looked absolutely spent, and you just wondered, like, when are they ever going to turn the corner? And it never really seemed to come, did it? But the second half did improve. That 9-game unbeaten run, I think there was only 3 or 4 wins in that run, though. There should have been more wins. The Bournemouth at home 3-0 up and not winning. Reading away was, how they didn't win that, I'll never know. But they'll be all the better for those experiences, and that's the key, because it was such a transition. You lose. Look at the players that went, Andre Ayew, Mark Gurhey, Freddie Woodman, and these are top-notch players, and it was always going to be a big ask for them to come anywhere near that top 6 or even the top half. So on the whole, it was a transition. The players are better for it now, and hopefully they'll hit the ground running. What was it, 1 win in the first 8 last season? Whereas you look at this summer, with the fixtures the way they panned out, you'd like to think they'll get, far more than that this time around.
Fingers crossed. What is the mood around the club over the summer? I mean, we've got quite a bit of our transfer work done early on in the season. Depending on how much you read into friendly results. I mean, they've been a little bit mixed, but there've been plenty of goals at both ends. What's the vibe that you're getting from the club at this stage? Are people generally happy with where we are? I guess it's got to be better than where we were this time last season.
Yeah, nail on the head there, Guto. It's far better than it was a year ago. Bearing in mind, Russell Martin wasn't even in at this point last year, so that's how mad it was. The mood seems good. I think Russell Martin's played it down a lot in terms of targets and promotion, whatever way you want to look at it. And ironically, we were at Charlton on Saturday and we asked Russell Martin about it, and he just said, we take it game by game. I know it's a cliche, but I don't blame him for doing that. And then about 10 minutes later, we interviewed Jamie Patterson, and he said the aim's promotion. So let's be honest, that shows you what the aim is. If you've had a full season under this system, with the styles and the players that have come in, they're all suited to this style, and it should benefit the squad. But realistically, if you're in the Championship, your aim is top 6, isn't it? You look at Luton last year, Huddersfield, these sort of teams, even like your Middlesbroughs, QPRs, they were all in the mix. So that's got to be the aim. Swansea will be better than they were last year. I've got no doubt about that. Whether they can make that top 6, I don't know. It's $1 million question, but I get the sense that the vibe is good. The players feel in a better place physically. Fitness is better, and you're going into that Rotherham game feeling like they should go in there and win. Whereas at Blackburn, I didn't have a clue what to expect, and like say Steve alluded to it there, it was just heart in your mouth every 30 seconds. It was bonkers, but we know what to expect now, and fans have been patient. Credit to them, it's not been easy. So I think there's far more expectation, and the players are probably under a bit more pressure to deliver this year, and so are the coaches, especially Russell Martin. But I think they can deliver on it. That's my own opinion, but I think they're better placed.
And in terms of transfers, I think we've seen on social media anyway, which is also always a bastion of wisdom, a few gripes recently, maybe increasing concern about the lack of right wing backs at the club. Are you getting any kind of steer on what the main aims are before the end of the window for the club, and kind of what the main objectives are from now on?
Yeah, so if you're talking purely in terms of transfers, wing back is a glaring priority. I mean, you lose Hannes Wolf and Cyrus Christie, who were both starters last season. It leaves you with Joel Latabaudiere, Ryan Manning, who can play there, and then of course they brought in Matti Sorinola, who I'll give you this one. I'm sure you probably knew anyway, but they were trying to get him on a permanent, which unfortunately couldn't be done. But they've still done well to get him on a loan, I think. So that would have been a great bit of business, I feel, if they could have got him on a 3-year deal. But yeah, they clearly need more in that area. And the Nat Ogbeta situation's an odd one. He's turned down, from what we heard in the last week or so, 3 offers to leave. Probably a League One club, but he's got a lot of interest as well, and he just doesn't seem to fit in the plans. And it shows you how behind the scenes how much of a mess that January window was. Even though they did get in 2 really good players in Cyrus Christie and Hannes Wolf, but that deadline day was just a bit of a mess, and they paid the price for it. They could have excelled in that second half. They did improve, I think, but they could have done far better than they did. So yeah, wing backs clearly a priority, and they will get 1 in, maybe even 2, but they'll definitely get 1 in. And then you probably look at that centre midfield area as a priority, isn't it? Losing Flynn Downs is huge. Bringing in Joe Allen, I mean, what a great bit of business. I feel that is 2-year deal. And, you boys as watch him in his first spell. I don't know you on the hype train. Maybe do you feel I would never get past it, but it's always one of those bringing old players in. There's got a risk, but I just feel that's a phenomenal piece of business to bring him on a 2-year deal on a free transfer. But you still need more, I think, with Jay Fulton's situation. I think they're still keen to get him off the wage bill. Liam Walsh is injured till you look in January, February. Maybe he's not available till March, April. Probably won't play anyway. So realistically, nothing's going to happen with him till next summer. So I think wing back, centre mid, and then obviously it depends on what happens with the Ryan Bennett's, the other lads, maybe the Jordan Garricks, your Carl Joseph. Hopefully they get the loans that they need, and hopefully they keep hold of Joel Pirro. I think that's the key one to it all, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I was going to ask you there. We spoke there about playing. I think we'd like to see leave the likes of Ryan Bennett to free up a bit of cash in terms of wages. But of course, a lot of the focus has been on Joel Pirro in particular. Some have had concerns, perhaps, that Michael Obafemi's form may attract some attention. Those are the two key players in an attacking sense, anyway. What are the chances that they're still going to be here at the end of the window, in your opinion? Are you hearing that there is a possibility they could move on?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it in your column for us. Was it the most recent one? It was on Saturday, wasn't it? With Obafemi and Pirro. I mean, Obafemi's transformation's been crazy. I mean, what we were first hearing from him at the club, it didn't sound encouraging at all. And you just thought, oh, what's going on here? And he wasn't getting the starts that you thought he was going to get. £1.5 million signing from Southampton. Credit to him, he's worked so hard, and he got that goal against, was it Blackburn, the second one after he scored that first one at Birmingham away, and he had a new lease of life. And moving Joel Pirro deeper was a masterstroke, and he carried on scoring goals as well, which was great. So undoubtedly he's going to get interest, isn't he, Obafemi? But he's got a good contract. He's got, I think, 2 years left, and so is Joel Pirro. He's definitely going to have interest this summer, even after Flynn Downs going. But with that Downs move, it just puts him in such a stronger position. If I was really worried about Joel Pirro, I thought he was nailed on to leave, and I thought they were going to sell him it was going to be another Joe Rodon, where they sold him well below his price. But I'd like to think that wouldn't happen now. Russell Martin's even gone on the record saying that. I think I did a piece after the which game was it? It was the Plymouth game 2 weeks ago in pre-season, where he said, they're far more confident of keeping hold of him now. Let's be honest, every player's got a price, haven't they? But if they got an offer of 11, 12 million for Joel Pirro, well, you would like to think they turn that down. Let's be honest, lads, you've seen it over the years with these owners. You never know, but I'd like to think they'd hold out for, if it was 12, 13 offer, would they hold out for 15, 16, 17? I'd like to think yes. You never know, but if you asked me 3-4 weeks ago when Flynn Downs was still at the club, well, I'd have been terrified that Pirro would have gone for 10, 11 million and that would have been it. So I don't think that'll happen anymore. That's my gut feeling anyway.
Yeah, from my point of view, I mean, I look at the situation where Dan James left 3 years ago for about 15 million, wasn't it, I think? Mm. And then obviously that put us in a stronger position to say no to those first few Ollie McBurney bids. Obviously it went to 20 million and then we decided we couldn't say no. So you'd like to think, wouldn't you, that the Swans are going to take the similar viewpoint of, we've got somebody out the door. We're now not absolutely desperate to sell. So let's at least make sure that we're not accepting the first couple of offers and the price goes more in the direction that we think he's worth. So then if we do get what we consider to be value for money, then fair enough. But like you say, we shouldn't be selling for 10, 11 million, should we?
No, not at all, Steve. I think you're bang on there. I mean, if someone comes in with 15, 16, I'd understand them considering it and maybe even accepting. Is it worth is that his value? I don't know, but I think they realistically want Ollie McBurney money. You're looking around the 18 million mark before add-ons. So whether they get it is another matter. But like you say, with that Flynn Downs money, it's no longer a desperation to sell because they had to sell someone this summer. So once those add-ons come in for Flynn Downs, you're probably looking anything from 11 to 12 million, maybe more. I'd like to think that they will stay unless a Brighton or a Leicester, someone like that comes in for him and offers really serious money. And then, if that happens, you can't begrudge the owners taking that. I think that's just sensible business, isn't it? But until that happens, you've got to stand to your guns, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that.
It'll be interesting to see what happens if, say, Pirou starts the season on fire and keeps scoring the way he has, last season in pre-season. Will that maybe just, draw a little bit more attention from Premier League clubs? Because I'd imagine, clubs are perfectly aware of Pirou. I mean, they've got to know about him now, scouting the way it is these days. I just wonder if there are a couple of clubs just waiting to see how he starts the season, just to see if there are any signs of second season syndrome, and if he starts the season well, are we going to see a few late bids? That's what I'm slightly scared of, but we'll wait and see. Steve, just in terms of the remaining transfer window, there's a long way to go until September 1st. What do you think needs to be done between now and that window closing to complete the job?
Well, the right wing back is obviously the priority. If I'm honest, I'm a bit frustrated by the club's stance of still one out, one in. Now, I do understand that to a point, but I think for a right wing back, there should be an exception because we really are crying out for one. I think in the other positions, you could argue that then we would have a good first 11, and it would be more a depth issue than anything else in certain positions, like centre midfield being the obvious one. And if Pirou was to go, there'd have to be a replacement there, for example. And a wing back, arguably, we do need more than one, but we need to get one in, I would say, fairly quickly now. I mean, we're a matter of days away from the start of the season, and we haven't done that yet, and that does leave me frustrated. I don't want to be seeing Latibaudiere playing in that position at Rotherham on Saturday, but I get the feeling that is going to be the case. So, there's definitely, that's the main priority. Probably another one in that position, central midfield, and then we're looking really in terms of what do we, if anybody else goes really. So, but I do think 1 to 11, if we take out the wing back issue, we're in quite a good position, I think, if everybody's fit. Obviously, I know Joe Allen probably certainly isn't going to start on Saturday, but once he is available and fit, then, I think our 1 to 11 will be nearly anybody game.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. I mean, looking at the options, obviously, like you said, Allen's coming back to fitness now. Cabango's, according to Russell Martin, going to be involved in some capacity against Rotherham, they hope, which is a massive boost, because I think we saw when he got his injuries, when he was injured towards the end of last season, I think we saw the impact not having him in the team had on our defensive capacity. Really, it turned into a real mess once he went out of the team. I mean, Mitch, it feels like we're very nearly approaching our full strength team as the season approaches. Just a couple of gaps left to fill.
Yeah, pretty much. I think you boys nailed it. It's the wing back that's a big problem at the moment. I feel I do quite like Ryan Manning at left wing back, and if you put him there and you have Matti Soronola, because he played on the right all through pre-season. I think first half he played on the left on Saturday at Charlton, and then he swapped over in the second half. And it was the other way around actually. So you can play on both sides. So it's not a case of bringing in a right wing back. It's just a case of bringing in a wing back if they're versatile. Like I think Cyrus Christie played on both sides last season as well, didn't he? So somebody like that who can do that job and is both, ambidextrous and play with both feet. I think you are, like you said, you are suddenly looking at a very, very good 11 with some really good backup options. Maybe the sort of 3 or 4 subs. You're looking at maybe a Ryan Manning, Olivier Ncham, Cam Congreve, who, by the way, what an assist on Saturday. I love that. But yeah, I think there's probably still 1 or 2 more that definitely needs coming to make it a really good squad. Because I think at the moment it's a good 12, 13, 14. It's not a good sort of 17, 18, is it?
No, I think that's a fair assessment. Let's look ahead now to Rotherham. Saturday, our first game of the season. Weird that's taking place in July, but that's the way this season is going to pan out. Steve, you're going up to Rotherham for this match. I mean, they were promoted last season in second place. Only by a point. They got run very close by the MK Dons towards the end of the season, surprisingly so, because they had a very handsome lead at one point, but they just about got across the line. How do you feel about playing a promoted team on the first day of the season? Is it a good or a bad time to play a team that's kind of adapting to a new league?
I don't think it's a bad fixture, to be honest. I mean, you can always say that when a team going into a higher division, they'll all be massively up for it. But I'm not sure if quite the buzz will be there for Rotherham in the way it would be for, I don't know, maybe for Sunderland, for example, because Rotherham effectively do a Norwich and a Fulham, don't they? They keep bouncing between the Championship and League One. So I don't think there'll be like that type of excitement there on Saturday. I mean, obviously I'm sure they'll be confident within reason. And if I'm being honest, I actually think they were quite unlucky to get relegated a couple of years ago. I remember they've seemed like one of the better sides that I'd seen. And I remember on the final day, watching the highlights, that they played really well at Cardiff and conceded at the end. And that obviously was what was the final nail in the coffin. But I don't think it's a bad fixture. I actually think the Swans' opening few games are quite reasonable, and there's a good chance of points on the board. And I'd like to think that Saturday definitely represents, a chance of a positive result. And I think it's a winnable game.
Like you said there, Steve, the last 6 seasons, Rotherham have either been promoted or relegated. They've just been bouncing back and forth, which is a crazy record. Imagine being a Rotherham fan. I mean, you get promoted and that celebration, and then you just know, next season we're going to be probably coming down again. And I think that from what I gather is kind of the expectation again this season. I don't think they are anticipating a change to that. I think they'll be very, very happy if they can just stay up this season. Mitch, are you going along with Steve there? Do you think it's a good way to start the season away at a club like Rotherham?
Yeah, I think it is. I think they're the early bookmakers' favourites to go down. So, I know you can never read too much into that, but you look at their squad on paper with the Championship experience they've got in there. There's not a lot in there. Dare I say, I was just glancing at the squad this afternoon when you asked me to come on. I think they've just signed Tom Eaves, who scored that in that horrible game up at Hull last season. Obviously, he's just gone back to Rotherham. Were you up there for that one? I think you were, Steve, the 2-0 at Hull.
No, thank God. I was not there. Terrible record at Hull. I've been 3 times. The only goal I've seen was a consolation in the last minute. Yeah, it's Hull is not one I like to go to. I've looked at the fixtures this year, and in the last 3 games, we've got Hull away and Norwich away. So if we end up in mid-table, I can tell you right now, there's not a chance of you going to either of them.
I don't blame you, mate. But no, Tom Eaves that day, he's he's just a physical, tall player, target man, and he's the kind of player on his day who could really have a lot of joy against Swansea's defence. And when I saw he'd gone to Rotherham, I thought, oh God, it was that sort of sinking feeling. But no, I've got to feel the same as Steve. I think it's a good fixture to have. If you can go there, play the way they want to play, Swans are going to dominate possession. I'd be surprised if they have less than 60-65% of the ball. It'd probably be closer to 70. You want to see them play on the front foot like they did at Charlton in the second half, create chances, and with Pirro, Obafemi, Patterson on song now as well, and Cham off the bench, so love his pace. There's goal scorers there, so you'd like to think they'll go up there, put on a show, and hopefully if they can start with a bang, it just lifts that confidence ahead of that home game against Blackburn, and suddenly the Jack Army come into that home game really sort of buzzing, and before you know it, you've got a bit of momentum. So I think it's a perfect kind of game. You don't really want to be playing a Burnley or a Norwich where you're underdogs, and you're going to be up against it with a team that are sort of well established and have got a lot of quality in there. On paper, Swansea are a better team than Rotherham. There's no disrespect to them, but like you said, there's a reason they've gone up and down for the last 6 years, which is a great stat, by the way, Guto. I expect nothing less from you, but I think it's a good way to start, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you spoke there about Tom Eaves. I agree with you. I think that's a really good signing for a club like Rotherham. He is just a handful. I don't know how many goals he's going to score in a season. I don't think he's going to be prolific, but he will make life very difficult for your defenders. And he's a difficult one to handle. But they're in a weird situation, Rotherham, because they've come up from League One, but they've lost their 2 top scorers. So Michael Smith's gone to Sheffield Wednesday, and Freddie Ladapo, who was with them last time they were in the Championship and was, I think, pretty decent the last time we played them, actually, that 3-1 game up in the COVID season. He's gone to Ipswich as well. They've also lost Higwe, who was a big defender for them. So they've lost a couple of key players after winning promotion, which is a bit of a weird one, Steve, but I'll be honest, it just, again, feeds into the sense that actually this is a good time to play Rotherham, because, things just don't seem to be quite as you'd expect for a newly promoted team. I don't sense that they've got that same excitement that say a Sunderland would have, or maybe even a Wigan, who's another team that's gone up and down in the last few years. It's weird that they've lost some key players over the summer just when they've gone up, and the players they brought in apart from Tom Eaves, I mean, they've brought in Connor Washington, who's never been particularly proven really at this level. I don't think he's ever really done in the Championship. And wasn't, I had a decent season last year in League One, but statistically at least didn't set the world of light. They've brought Peter Kioso in from Luton, decent signing, but nothing on the face of it. You can make a decent argument that they've actually got weaker since winning promotion.
Yeah, it looks like it, doesn't it? I mean, a striker leaving there to go to Sheffield Wednesday. Now, don't get me wrong. Sheffield Wednesday obviously are by far the bigger side, and it is very close to Rotherham, isn't it, geographically? I think there's only about 10 miles in it or something, if that. But at the end of the day, if a player's left Rotherham to go to Sheffield Wednesday when they're in the division lower, it's quite insulting, really, and it probably shows a lot about what that player maybe thinks about their long-term prospects. And, obviously financially there may have well been more money on the table as well. But yeah, it probably doesn't bode particularly well for Rotherham, does it, in that sense? Like I say, I think it is quite a good fixture to have on the opening day. I mean, you'd like to be at home, I think, ideally, but I think isn't it something like since 2005 we've only had 2 home games, I think, on the opening day. It's something crazy like that, and we're always away without fail, it seems, on the opening day, and that run has continued, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm not this year. I'm not too bothered that we're away on the first day of the season because I've got a family wedding to go to on Saturday, so I'd have missed the game anyway. So at least it's an away game that I'm missing, and not a home one. Mitch, going to put you slightly on the spot here because there is a slight elephant in the room with Rotherham. Earlier on the season, there was some talk online that we were being linked with Chidozie Ogbene, who's a very good wide player for Rotherham. Did really well last season. Has been playing for Ireland as well. Have you heard if there's anything in that at all, or if it's just internet talk?
Yeah, let's be honest, he's definitely an option. I think the key thing was, I'm sure you saw his quotes when he was on Ireland duty. It was as much of a come and get me please you could ever see from a professional football. I think he was supposed to be out of contract in June. They triggered his extension, so he's got 12 more months, but realistically, he's looking higher than Rotherham. You've just addressed it there with the, you don't leave Rotherham to drop into League One to go to Sheffield Wednesday if you're not sort of entirely, you don't do that if you're backing Rotherham to be a success in the Championship, do you? So I think he knows he's above that level, and he's a good Championship player. He's got international experience, so he ticks a lot of boxes for Swansea, who are looking for a wing back. Last year of his deal, financially they can make it work, but yeah, it sounds like I think Rotherham are playing a bit hardball there. So whether he's the prime option now, I must admit I don't know, but is he an option? Yes, absolutely. So whether it'll happen, time will tell. But they've certainly had to draw a big list because they explored Cyrus Christie, Hannes Wolf. They were never realistic, but they were always options here and did well. Marcus Harness was another one, which I think they quickly realised is probably not the best option, but it was explored. Ogbene probably makes the most sense in terms of the entire package. Financially, you'd like to think you get him on a good deal, on a good contract. He's not the youngest, so that's another sort of maybe a downside, because I think the Russell Martin particularly wants young players that they can develop and sell them for big profits, like your Flynn Downs, Obafemis, Kabangos, Joel Pirros. But yeah, to answer your question, Guto, going around the houses there, but yeah, definitely an option. Whether it happens, I'm not too sure at this stage, but yeah, he's certainly been looked at.
I'd love it if that happened. That would be a hell of a signing, I think. Would really suit this team. Right, let's get on to predictions. Rotherham have won their last 3 opening day fixtures, by the way. If you think that has any kind of bearing on this kind of fixture, I don't know, that's up to you. But Steve, do you think they're going to make it 4 opening day wins in a row?
No, I know I'm not usually Mr. Optimistic, but I'm going to say 2-1 for the Swans. I think we're going to win. Mitch,
are you matching Steve's optimism?
I'm not matching it. I'm going one better, mate. I think it's going to be, I'm never going to say comfortable, but no, I fancy the Swans. I'll go 2-0.
Wow. Do you know what? I'm going to go possibly one step. I'm going to say it's 3-1. I just feel possibly this is a good time to play Rotherham. Maybe they won't quite be ready for it. I hesitate to say that because it's never easy when you play against Rotherham. You know, Paul Wall's a good manager, gets the most out of his players, and whatever team they have available, they're going to be hard working. But I just hope we've got that kind of edge going into this game, and you know, with Obafemi and Pirou playing up front, they can score against absolutely anybody. So I'm hoping that they'll have their shooting boots on for this one as well, and we can get the season off to a good start. And with that in mind, let's look ahead to the season as a whole, and ask what can we expect, not just from the Swans, but from the rest of the division as well. I mean, Mitch, what do you think? You said there that, you know, Jamie Patterson said the aim is promotion. Do you think that's a realistic aim for the Swans this season?
I definitely think it's an aim. I think I probably had more confidence in the teams of the last 2 seasons, well, the 2 seasons under Cooper, where you always felt, playoffs is possible. Whereas now I'm not entirely convinced that they're nailed on. That said, in my pre-season supplement, this was written about 2 weeks ago, so I actually said they finished 6th, and I thought they would have done a bit more business by now. Those 4 players they brought in, was it Sorinola, Nathan Wood, Harry Darling and Joe Allen, you know, I think that's really good business. But I thought they'd have had 1 or 2 more in by this sort of Rotherham game, and I think they've just been caught up with these exits, your Ryan Bennett's, your Jay Fultons, and then the fringe lads as well. So maybe I'd probably slip towards that sort of 8th, 9th bracket, maybe just outside the playoffs. I think they'll be in contention at stages this season, maybe for long periods as well. But that depth might just kill them. You know, if you lose 1 or 2 players in the season, it could be tough. So they're well placed. I think they're going to be far better than they were last season. And like you say, if they can go to Rotherham, get a win, Joe Allen then comes back in, Ben Cabango comes back in, bring in maybe 1 or 2 more, and suddenly it's looking like a really good squad. So you never know. I think they'll be in the mix. Whether they can get that top 6, it's going to be nip and tuck, I think.
Steve, are you sensing that fans are generally optimistic going into the season? Do you think there is a feeling among fans that there could be good times ahead over the coming months?
I think it's a tricky one. I think the truth is when it comes to predictions, isn't it? It's far easier to give them on maybe the 1st or the 2nd of September, isn't it? When you know exactly what you've got for the next few months at least. And obviously at that point you played a few games as well, so you can make judgments on that. So we're a little bit blind at the moment, aren't we? Because a lot could change still before the transfer window shuts. But I do think we're in a better position than we were last season. We've addressed some of our issues, not addressed all of them. I think some of the things we've done behind the scenes have been good as well. Obviously, we brought in a set piece coach, which I would say a very good move because that was a weakness last season. So I was pleased with that. Yeah, I think there are grounds to be optimistic, aren't there? But I mean, if Joel Perreault gets sold on deadline day and then isn't adequately replaced, then that optimism will be, will go down quite a bit, I would have thought. So that's what we're up against, isn't it? But I do feel like we're in a reasonable position. I think if we are going to bring in another couple, certainly in the wing back position, then we would have a chance of pushing for the playoffs. But I mean, it's still just up in the air at the moment, isn't it? So, but I think we can feel optimistic, definitely more optimistic than this time a year ago anyway.
You're right there, actually. You would think that the eve of the big season kickoff then would be the perfect time to make a prediction, but because of the way the transfer window works, etc., you don't really know. But I was asked to do a prediction or kind of answer questions for 442 season preview. But they asked me it basically like a week or 2 after the end of the last season. So it was just like, how do you expect me to answer these questions? We hadn't bought anybody. We hadn't sold anybody. We didn't know what was going to happen. If you're buying that preview, sorry if I've written something.
But I've literally bought it today. And I was going to say, they've asked me before. And I remember they asked me at the end of June, I think. And I'd given the prediction of like staying up comfortably in the Prem. But at this point, we just signed Tammy Abraham. We still have the Rente and Sigurdsson. And I'm thinking, well, there's definitely goals in this team. And then obviously, time the window had shut. Sigurdsson had been replaced by Sam Klukas and Lorente and Don. And you're thinking, okay, we might be in trouble here, boys.
And a slightly crockett Wilfred Boney as well.
Wilfred Boney that was not quite what he was.
that was such a bad window. It was absolutely appalling. But we're not looking back over that now. We're concentrating on the future and hopefully a brighter future than that we go on to have that season. So, Mitch, when you look across the league, who are the teams that stand out for you as potential promotion candidates? And I think over the past few seasons, there have always been like one or two teams that you say, oh, they'll definitely be among, the top 3 or 4 there. Do you sense that there's a team like that in this season's championship?
Not compared to previous seasons. I must admit, Fulham were just far superior last year, and it was blindingly obvious they were going to be up there in the mix, and even Bournemouth to an extent as well. And you look at the way they strengthened through the season; they were always going to be tough to compete with. But this year, I don't think there is a nailed-on cert to be in the top 2. If I was going to pick someone, I'd probably go for Norwich purely because of the Teemu Pukki, the style, the way they are, and they've got a good squad there as well. So if I was going to pick someone to be up there, it would be them. But Burnley, a little bit of an unknown quantity under Vincent Kompany. Sold a lot of key players as well. You Ben Nees, Tarkovskis, they've been stalwarts there for a long time. So it's going to be tough. But if I look beyond those teams that came down, I think Sheffield United have got a great chance because they were great to watch under Paul Heckingbottom for long spells. And, as much as it was awful to watch from Swansea's perspective, when they played against Swans at Bramall Lane, the 4-0, Morgan Gibbs-White was excellent. And obviously he's gone back to Wolves. But as a squad, they look very good. He's coached them really well. So I think they're probably the ones that have been established in the Championship that I tip to maybe crack that sort of maybe top 2, but certainly top 6. But I don't think there's a cert to be in that top 2. I don't know what you boys think, but in previous years, it seems to have been a bit more obvious.
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm seeing it as well. I last season, I kind of looked at there was a top 4 that I picked. I couldn't see anybody else finishing in the top 4 other than Fulham, who else? Bournemouth, Sheffield United and West Brom. Now, obviously, West Brom had a nightmare season and Sheffield United had to, claw it back late on in the season. But, Fulham and Bournemouth were both in the top 2. I don't really see as obvious an option this time around, partly because I don't think the relegated teams are quite as strong. Like you point out there, Burnley have lost their, so many of their key players, really. Pope, Tarkovsky, Mee, Collins. That's what their success was based on. The Premier League really was a great goal and a solid defence. To lose those and replace them with youngsters, unproven, with a new system, it feels very Graham Potter Swansea, if I'm being honest. So I'm not convinced by Burnley. I agree with you. I think Sheffield United are my early season favourites. I think they've got a decent squad even without Gibbs-White. I just question the manager there, whether he's got what it takes to get them into the top 2. The other team I'm putting up there, Watford. But again, you don't know what kind of squad they're going to have by the time the window closes. They could end up losing a few key players. I don't think their squad is quite probably as good as it was the last time it was in the Championship when, individual quality alone was good enough to take them back up automatically. And if I'm looking for a third team, maybe to go up through the playoffs, I'm tempted to go for Borough. Chris Wilder's obviously a brilliant manager and he turned things around there last season. They probably should have made the playoffs, but couldn't quite sustain it. The only thing with them is goals because they don't really have strikers at the moment. But you'd have to think that there will be a striker coming in there. And I'd expect them to be in the top 6 anyway, even if they can't make the top 2. Steve, who are you looking at as the potential promotion candidates?
I think you've named most of them, really. I mean, I think what is tough for the likes of us this year is there's actually 5 teams with parachute payments. You've obviously got the 3 that have come down, Norwich, Watford, and Burnley. And then you've got Sheffield United and West Brom as well. So, I mean, when you think about it, if those 5 get their acts together, they should all finish in the top 6, really, shouldn't they? So then that does make it quite tough. But, I mean, I agree with what you're saying about Burnley, for example, though, because obviously they've had to make changes, haven't they, because of their financial situation. And, there's probably going to be 1 or 2 more that leave there. So they would be an interesting one. And obviously they have appointed Vincent Kompany, who is a little bit more unknown maybe than some of the other managers. I mean, he was at Anderlecht when it didn't go brilliantly. You've got to fancy Norwich, haven't you? They're just the masters at it. They'll be in there for sure. I would have thought Watford, as you say. I I mean, I think Sheffield United, the key thing is that you look at them, they've always got goals in them, haven't they? I mean, I think the likes of Brewster haven't really hit the heights there that they maybe expected, but maybe his time will come now. Billy Sharp, I mean, I know he's getting on a bit, but he's always banging in goals, isn't he? I think West Brom have done some decent business with the likes of John Swift has gone there on the free, isn't he? So that's a good one, I think.
But they've got Steve Bruce.
They have. I think Steve Bruce is as bad as what people think. It was quite uninspiring at Newcastle, but I mean his record in this division in general has always been quite good. So, if it doesn't go that great, always got to remember, a bit like with Sheffield United last year with Jokanovic, which I thought was a good appointment, and it proved not to be the case. You can just sack them and get someone else in, which is inevitably what Watford are going to do if it doesn't go great for Rob Edwards, isn't it? Because that is the standard default Watford move. So, I think I can't really look past those clubs, but I do think that there often is a surprise in this division. I mean, we don't know, and I do think we do have a chance of the playoffs in the right circumstances. So, certainly from our point of view, I think it will be tough if all those sides get their act together. But that in this division, there's usually somebody that does cock up. So we'll just have to wait and see, I suppose, won't we?
Yeah, speaking of teams that cock up, let's stop down to the bottom three now. Let's revel in some clubs' misery. Let's hope as well the Swans aren't involved at this end of the table. But Mitch, who are the teams that you're tipping to struggle?
Well, yeah, just going back to that one Steve was saying there, I think we forgot to mention Preston. I mean, I thought they were good in spells last year, and I love Ryan Lowe, but look at the business they've done. I mean, Freddie Woodman, Ben Woodburn, players that have got points to prove in some ways. Robbie Brady experienced at that level. I think they've just had Troy Parrott as well. So, yeah, we probably should have mentioned them as well. But, yeah, in terms of the bottom, I think Rotherham have got to be in that mix, haven't they? I see them struggling. Probably Wigan as well. I think they're going to be in and around it. I know this might sound a bit sloppy, just picking the teams that have come up, but I just don't see where they're going to get the goals. And, I certainly think Rotherham will be in there. And then you're looking at Reading. Probably it depends how they get on with. It's been such a tough transfer window for them. They've still made some, they've done some good business there, but it's just how they get on with, Paul Ince as well. He's got a point to prove there, hasn't he? Because he only came in through last season. So I think they'll be down there. Bristol City are another one that's hard to tell with them. So I think you're looking at sort of a cluster of about 5, maybe even 6. We saw it last season, Cardiff. I mean, they've had a complete overhaul in the summer. How are they going to get on? Could they be top 10? Could they be bottom 3? You haven't got a clue. So you never know with them either, do you? So probably Rotherham nailed on. Wigan, I think they'll be in that mix. Reading will be around there, and Bristol City. But beyond that, Luton, could they do a Huddersfield? Could they go from top to bottom with a bit of a struggle? I don't think they will. I think Nathan Jones is savvy enough, but I think they massively overachieved last season. And you look at Barnsley, what they did in the year. They played Swansea in the playoffs as well, and they went from top 6 to relegation. So I think Luton have got enough about them to certainly avoid that. But you never know, do you? You never know. I think Wigan, Rotherham, third between Bristol City and Reading, maybe.
But what you're saying is we should bet on Cardiff to go down.
I didn't say that, Guto. Words in my mouth, mate.
There's the headline: Wales Online journalist tips Cardiff for relegation.
Nice. You crack on, mate.
Steve, who are the ones you're looking at as relegation candidates?
I think Rotherham and Wigan sort of have to be mentioned because just like Wigan literally are another one that bounce between the two divisions, and they just can't seem to get a foothold when they come up. So, I think those two, you've got to really fancy them to be bottom 6, haven't you? I mean, Reading are an obvious one. They've got those financial issues, haven't they? They were poor last year. They probably, if Derby hadn't had that deduction, they would have been in a lot more trouble, I think, when they're not saying they would have gone down. But
they've lost their entire midfield as well over the summer. They've lost Laurent, Rinomhota and Swift over the summer. That's a heck of a gap for them to fill.
They just don't have the finances either. I know they've been linked with 1 or 2 of our players, for example, haven't they? But I mean, you'd be worried if you were Reading, I think. I mean, they could well go. I mean, I think Huddersfield might really struggle. They sold a couple. The manager's gone. I think the youth team coach has taken it. Like they're really going to strengthen much. I'd be worried if I was a Huddersfield fan. So the really funny thing is, I think about Huddersfield as well, is that I went to the game up there last year, and obviously the game at our place, I actually thought they were crap in both games. It's a bit of a mystery how the hell they ended up there, because we beat them 1-0 at home, and I thought they were awful. And I remember in the second half up there, in one of the coldest games I've ever been to, we were literally camped in their half. They couldn't get out. So I'm not convinced Huddersfield were as good as maybe what they suggested last year anyway. And they've lost a couple to Forest, for example. They could be a dark horse to go down.
There are those teams like every season, isn't there? There's one team that just kind of finds a way of winning and getting into the top 6, and you're not quite sure how they've done it, because when you look at them play, you're thinking, how on earth are these there? Let's face it, us under Steve Cooper in the second season when we actually made it to Wembley, you could probably make the argument, especially based on the second half of that season, that we fitted that description. But I think Huddersfield just had a hell of a lot of set-piece goals as well. And, they had a decent defence and a good goalkeeper, but they were very reliant on set pieces for their wins last season. And I can see why people are tipping them to struggle this time around.
Yeah, I think they may struggle, but obviously we haven't mentioned Cardiff, and I think they're a team that's very unpredictable. I mean, they may have signed these like geniuses that no one's heard of, or it could go badly wrong, or obviously it could be in the middle. We don't know, do we? But I mean, I think if I was a Cardiff fan and Steve Morrison doing a rebuild, I wouldn't be overly optimistic. I've got to be honest.
Well, I'm not going to pass judgment on Cardiff at this stage of the podcast, but for me, I think, you've named most of the teams, that I'd suggest could be dragged into it. Rotherham and Wigan are prime candidates, especially Rotherham. I think after the difficult summer they've had, Reading, I don't know. The thing is with Reading, they can be so bad, but they find a way of staying up somehow. And I think that might be the case this season. I'm not sure if Huddersfield quite bad enough to go down. Not quite bad enough, but I don't think I would take a heck of a collapse for them to actually go down. I'm not sure if that's going to happen. The team that I'm looking at most likely to join them is Birmingham, because they seem like an absolute basket case of a club at the moment. They are all over the shop off the field. And I don't think their squad is particularly great. How Eustace does there as manager, we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, clubs like us have tried to get him in the past as manager. But it's a difficult club to go into, and I'd worry if I was a Birmingham fan. I think this may be the season that they finally go down into League One, but we'll wait and see. Let's go back to discussing the Swans. Mitch, you've touched on it. Where do you think, if you were to put your head on the block now, where do you expect the Swans to finish this season?
If I'm being brutally honest, I think they'll be just outside that playoff spot. And I know that's not what I didn't commit to that in print. I actually said top 6 because I genuinely thought they'd have had a couple more in by now. But that's the joy of writing a couple of weeks before deadlines. But I think they just might be short. 1 or 2 injuries here and there, it could hamper them. So unless they have a really good last month in the window, which I'm still confident, I still think they'll get in 2 or 3 more. And hopefully lose, the couple of fringe players that they need to. But it's a tough ask to get that top 6. Like you said, there's 5 that really should be in there with the parachute payments. Some of the other teams who've been in and around there, I don't expect Huddersfield or Luton to be back up there again. But your Middlesbroughs, your Prestons, they've done some good business. So I think I'd probably go for around the 8th or 9th mark, if I'm being brutally honest, Guto.
Yeah, Steve, do you think we'll crack the top 6?
Not quite as things stand. I think it's very similar to Mitch thinking about 8th. I think that's probably where we're at. We're just a little bit short, and it's the lack of depth, I think, that's going to cause us the real issue, because we're well covered in some positions, but then there's others where if the first choice player is out, then we really don't have great options, I don't think. So and I haven't mentioned it yet, but I'm the goalkeeper that's slightly concerned me a little bit as well. I think he can be good, but he does have a mistake in him. So yeah, I think we're slightly short, but that might change. I mean, like I said, I might be willing to give a different answer once the transfer window is shut and I've seen a few games. But obviously we are making these predictions before a ball is kicked, and I think as things stand, we're slightly short of the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I'm going to have to be boring and agree with you, but yeah, I've written down 8th here. Sorry, listeners, it's monotonous this section of the podcast. What worries me is the defence. I think it was particularly bad last season for most of the campaign. I know we got a lot of clean sheets, but I think that the clean sheets total disguised really what was a pretty chronic situation at the back. I just don't think we had the right shape. I don't think we looked anywhere near good enough during transitions, and the problems were so severe. I'm thinking it would take a major improvement to get us up to the stage where we'd need to get into the playoffs. Now that might happen. That might have happened over the summer. Russell Martin, with time with the squad, may have ironed out all those creases. But I just don't know if the defence is quite good enough, even with Darling coming in, even with the summer to improve things, to compensate really enough. I think we're definitely capable of making the top six, along with a lot of other clubs in what should be a very open championship. But my feeling is that I think there are other teams that I would expect to finish sixth ahead of us. Although with the goals of Obafemi and Piru, I think we should be able to put up much more of a challenge this season than we did last year. And if I'm being honest, if we finish in the top 10, I don't think that would be a bad season. I think that would be, a substantial step forward. And it would be nice to have that excitement of a playoff push. Just because last season, unusually really for us, we didn't really have anything to play for the entire campaign. It was it was pretty obvious relatively early in the season that we'd be too good to go down, but we never ever looked really like putting together a serious push for the top six. So it would be nice if we had something to get excited about this season instead of just spending the entire campaign in mid-table. Mitch, because we like to discuss our friends down the road on this podcast, let's have a quick word about Cardiff. They've been through major changes this summer, probably the most radical summer of change that they've had in generations, really. What's your gut feeling on how their season will go?
I'll be honest, Guto, I haven't got a clue. We touched upon it earlier. I think they'll be far too good to be worried about going down, but I can't see them. Was it 18th they were last year, 3 or 4 places behind the Swans, and it was they were really poor in long spells last season. The jury's out on Steve Morrison. I think even from Cardiff fans, there's been, let's be honest, that rebuild and the reset that they've had this summer it's been in the offing for years, and they've just put it off with your Neil Warnocks and your Mick McCarthy's, Neil Harris. So what I would say is give Steve Morrison credit for making sure that happened. Now, it did need to happen. Whether it pays off this season, I don't think it will, but it's for the long-term benefit of the club, because that they needed that. They've needed it for such a long time, and they're no longer getting the parachute payments because obviously they went straight back down in, was it 17-18 when they went up? So it's something that should have happened a long time ago, in my opinion. They'll be better for this in the long run, but in the short term, it's probably going to be tough, as Swansea found out themselves now going into the 5th season of the Championship. So you just don't know. Like you said, they've got still some decent players there. Joe Rowell signing a new deal is a big bit of business for them, but there's just a lot of unknown quantities in there, isn't there? So you really don't know. It's so uncertain, a little bit like Swansea last season. Of course, I think Swansea were far more stable than what Cardiff are at the moment going into this season. So they could be a surprise package in terms of challenging the playoffs, but they could also be a team that flirts with relegation for a long period of the season. You really don't know, do you?
Yeah, I don't think they'll massively miss any of the players that have been sold. I think
no, not at all.
I think the players that have been sold have by and large been ones that have held them back, if anything. Even players like Eden Flint, who had a decent season by his standards last year. I just you're not going to build a promotion chasing team around Eden Flint at this stage of his career. Marlon Pack, Will Vokes, they're deadwood. Leandro Bacuna is just not a good player at this level. People like Josh Murphy, who's been just sucking wages out of that club, really, for, like some kind of vampire for the last few years. It's I don't think they'll miss any of the players that they've let go. But at the same time, I'm looking at the players they brought in, and there are a couple who you think Rinomhota is the one that you'd expect to fit in quite well in that midfield. I think he'll do well there. Romain Sawyers should be a good signing. I think in most Championship clubs he would be a good signing for them. Shea Ojo's been there before and done okay. I've always liked Marlon Romeo as a right back. So there's some decent signings there, but I don't see signings there that are going to take them to the next level. Personally, I think there are a couple of young signings there who could turn out okay down the line, but this season now I just don't really see it. And for the moment, at least, they look very short up front. I'm not really seeing where the goals are going to come from. So I don't think there'll be much difference between where they were last season and where they'll finish this season. I think they'll be bottom half. I'll go for around 15th, roughly where the Swans finished last season. Steve, where do you think? How do you think their season's going to go?
I would be a bit concerned if I'm a Cardiff fan. I mean, like I've already touched on, I don't think Steve Morrison is a particularly good manager. I don't like the way he seems to dig out young players regularly. At some point, I think he's going to throw a few people under the bus, and the players are actually going to stop playing for him. So I'm not sure he's going to last there, and I'm not convinced he'll be there this time next year. But like I said, they're an unknown quantity. We made a lot of signings, changed it round. Obviously, I could be very wrong, and they might be the surprise package and do really well, but I don't think that will happen. I think, they'll be bottom half most likely, but I think they could end up in a relegation scrap. It wouldn't be a massive shock to me, because I really don't think they're a particularly good side, and like I said, the manager doesn't convince me either. So, I wouldn't be feeling a lot of optimism going into the season if I supported Cardiff.
Mitch, just before we move on from Cardiff, kind of as a journalist who interviews managers, what's your take on Steve Morrison? Because he definitely gives the media good lines. He's perfectly happy to slate his own players very openly. I mean, he must be a dream for a journalist.
Yeah, I mean, I never really deal with him. I've done a couple of bits with him. But yeah, I mean, you speak to the Cardiff lads, and he's done barely anything with local media in pre-season. I think it's all been in-house, which I don't know the reasons behind that, but it seems a bit strange for me. Russell Martin's been the polar opposite. I was at Plymouth, and he was more than happy to chat to us for 10 minutes, and then another 10 minutes just general catching up how the summer's been. And Russell Martin, I think's a phenomenal character. His backroom staff. Funny enough, I bumped into Matt Gill while he was shopping at the weekend. He was with his little girl who's having her birthday. And they're very pleasant. They're happy to give you the time, and I think Swansea are very lucky to have such a good group of coaching staff in. But in terms of Steve Morrison, like I said, I don't really want to judge too much because I don't deal with him on a daily or weekly basis. But I think you boys know as well. You hear it from the outside. You mentioned him digging out players, and a lot of people don't like that. And it's a very old school approach. I think if you go back 10, 20 years, it would have probably been far more accepted, whereas now I don't think it is as much. Some players thrive on that. If they get called out, they'll do everything they can to prove those comments wrong. So maybe that's the approach he takes, and it'll work with some. But like Steve says, if it doesn't work, he could easily be out of a job in December, January, and you just don't know how it's going to pan out with him there. So I think he deserves a lot of credit for taking the bullet and making these huge changes, because it had to happen at that club. I think it's long overdue. But is he the right man to go the next step? I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, Guto, I think you bang on in terms of giving a quote. He's probably a journalist's dream in terms of having stuff to write.
Mitch, what I was going to ask you actually was, what are the Swansea Cardiff games like to cover from a journalist perspective? Obviously, I know you're not from the area originally, but they must be great fun from your point of view.
Yeah, last season was all right, wasn't it?
Well, for our point of view, yeah.
It's the first doob I've ever covered. No, it was excellent, Steve. The first one I covered was the Ben Wilmot derby. Obviously, there was a massive gap from the Premier League era to then. And I only came down, to South Wales originally in 2015, and then at Media Wales in 2016. So the Ben Wilmot derby was phenomenal. A packed out away end they were in because of the way that the buses work, as having been on them, boys. The atmosphere builds really, really early, 12 o'clock kickoff on a Sunday lunchtime. the atmosphere was fantastic, and I absolutely loved it, covering it. And then, the emotion when Wilmot scores that winner, and you see the relief, the celebrations afterwards, the way Steve Cooper was, and the players, the interviews you get, and the social media for hours and days after. And then, this season was just on another level. 3-0 was just unbelievable. And then to go and do what they did at Cardiff City Stadium was outrageous. And, I think I've seen pictures of you, Steve, in the away end, and I think that sums it all up. It must have been, for you boys, it must have just been off the charts, unbelievable. And, those are memories and pictures and videos that will live with you for the rest of your lives. So to be a part of that and cover it from a journalist point of view, it was an absolute pleasure. And it was just a masterclass on the day. And you've got to give the coaching staff so much credit for how they nailed those two fixtures emotionally. You look at the club as a whole, the media team, I thought they nailed it, the way they built it up and the way they followed it up afterwards. The chefs, the coaches, the people at the reception, it was just fantastic. It was such an occasion. Those are memories that will live with the fans for such a long time, or for the rest of your lives, I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that, to be honest. It was, the only problem now is how do we top it?
8-0 next year, is it?
Yeah, can we do the double-double?
A doob.
Yeah.
Doob. That's the main target for this season, obviously, the doob. Before we finish off our season preview, just want to get your opinions on who is likely to be the Swans Player of the Year this season, and who's going to be the top scorer, which usually is quite a simple question to answer, but may not be this time around. Mitch, who have you got in mind for both of those gongs?
Yeah, I think the obvious one, if he's still here, Joel Pirro for top scorer. I don't think you can doubt that. I fancy Michael Obafemi to have a really good season. I think he's going to be around that 15 goal mark. If he can crack 15 plus, I think Swans will have a great season, especially if Pirro stays here, because he looks certain to get minimum 15, maybe closer to the 20 plus mark. Player of the season, I really don't know, because if you ask me before his injury, I think Joe Allen, I know he wasn't a Swansea player then, but I think he was just going to be so key. But I think he might have to be carefully managed in some spells. So we might not see the best of him every week. You'll probably get really good games out of him, but maybe not quite week in, week out while he sort of manages that injury and looks ahead to the World Cup. So I think you're probably looking at, I don't want to say Pirro because that's probably too obvious. I think Patterson's ready to explode this season. He had a great year last year. Chatting to him at Charlton on Saturday, he felt in a really good place. Harry Darling, okay, mistake aside on Saturday, that's the way you'd rather that happen in pre-season. What a player he is. I think he's going to have a great year, and he's probably going to show that he is more than capable of being that positive link up between Andy Fisher and the defence and the midfield, which was probably lacking for long spells last year, partly because Russell Martin had to chop and change the defence so often, understandably, because they didn't have the combinations they wanted. But I think the back three is going to be far more settled this season. Kyle Norton, obviously, is going to play a big part in that, but I think Harry Darling's going to be a huge player this season, so maybe I'd go for him.
Steve, who are you thinking?
I think this is quite a tough one, actually. I think it could be Obafemi. I think, obviously, he was brilliant in the second half of last season. If he can produce that over a full season, then it could well be him, couldn't it? The truth is, we know Pirro could go in terms of top scorer, so that automatically makes me think that Obafemi might be the more likely one to be the top scorer. But I honestly think he could be the top scorer and be the player of the year. I think he's certainly got the potential for it. You look at the other players. Patterson would be an obvious candidate. If Grimes can maybe add a little bit more in terms of goals and assists, that would make a difference. I think Darling, could be really good, but at the same time, you wonder if defensively we're still not going to be quite what maybe we need to be, and that could count against him then. So, but it'll be interesting. Or it could be a player that hasn't come through the door yet. You don't know, do you? So, but I think they're the contenders at the moment. But it can change, can't it? You don't know. I still think Olivier and Cham has got a lot to give if we can get the best out of him. I'd like to think that he'd be better again this year. If he was to take the division by storm, it could be him. But unfortunately, I don't think we're going to quite get that from him. But I'd like to think that it's in there somewhere.
What I would give to see Olivier and Cham have that kind of season, honestly, because when he plays well, man, is he a beautiful player to watch. Like, even when he came on against Charlton the weekend, like that cross-field pass in the build-up to Manning's goal, you're just thinking, That's beautiful. I mean, everything he does is elegant when he's, when he's fit and when he's firing. But obviously, we know that inconsistencies to his game are an issue. And unfortunately, I don't see him turning into that player. But for me, I would actually back Obafemi to tip Joel Peru to the top scorers title. I think he's probably going to be the out-and-out striker in the team. And just the way he was playing at the end of last season, the boost that he's had from playing for Ireland and that the performance that he had against Scotland, I just got a feeling about Obafemi that this could be a big season for him. I'd love to see him carry on developing the way he has since Christmas. And if I was to back anybody to get the Player of the Season award, I would optimistically say that Piru is going to stay here for the entire season and that he's going to have another amazing campaign like he did last year, and that he's going to have a major contribution not just in goals but in the build-up play as well. And if the two of those can really click this season the way they did towards the end of last season, I think there's a real potential for us to be a fantastic team to watch, a very exciting team to watch. And their goals, we're going to need those goals probably to get us near the top six. So I'd love it to be the case that they keep on developing the way they did, and give us something to hope for. Before we finish this podcast, Mitch, just want to go away from the Swans for a second and discuss another team that's very, very close to our hearts, the Welsh national team. What's it been like covering them over the last year or two, because between the Euros, the 2020 Euros, which were obviously delayed a year but for COVID, again a lot of games there were played behind closed doors, and then in this qualifying campaign we've managed to finally get ourselves across the line and qualify for the World Cup, culminating with that game against Ukraine. What's it been like following their exploits over recent years?
Oh, Guto, what a pleasure. I mean, it's been phenomenal. If I wasn't there as a journo, I'd be there as a fan. So, the three of us have all been there through the doldrums, some tough games, horrible performances, players pulling out here, there and everywhere. And, Euro 2016, I don't think we ever thought that was going to be topped. And then, another Euros 4 years later, or 5 years with the postponement, and then a World Cup. I mean, it's unbelievable. So, incredibly fortunate to be covering them at all, but in this period, even more so. So that Ukraine game was special. It was a tough watch because I thought Ukraine acquitted themselves incredibly well, and they were phenomenal in the semi-final at Scotland as well. So did a very good job to get through that one. And you look at the group, I think it's I wouldn't say a favourable group, but it's one that Wales can certainly feel confident of getting out of if they can get a good result in that first game against the USA, and then Iran, a bit of an unknown quantity. So, if you get a good result in that first match, then you'd like to think they'll be in a good position to get through the group. And let's not go into England. I don't think any of us want to look too far ahead on that one. But it's just been a pleasure. Last month was incredible, covering 4 Nations League matches as well, and the trips you get to do. I know, Steve, you went out there as well, didn't you, last month? And they're just memories that stay with you. And even, it's almost like especially when you're a fan, and even I suppose as a journo, when you're just working, the results kind of don't matter. It makes it far more enjoyable if Wales get the results you want. But the trips, the memories, the people you meet and chat to when you go abroad, it's just an absolute joy. I'm very lucky to be able to do it. And in this of all eras, with 2016 onwards, it's been pretty special, hasn't it, lads?
Absolutely. And have you won the Wales online lottery to go out to Qatar?
I think so. Still waiting on certain bits to be resolved, but I've been told hopefully we can be there. So still waiting on that to be all confirmed. So I'm not going to count my chickens until it's done.
Oh, fantastic. And how do you expect that World Cup to go for Wales? It's an unusual one because of the time of year, the location, etc. And the fact that we are in the World Cup to begin with, in fairness. Do you think, it's a matter of we qualified and that's the most important thing, or do you think they'll be disappointed if we don't get out to the group stage?
I actually think it's a bit of both, Guto. I don't know what you two feel, but like I say, first one since 58. I mean, getting there is just astonishing. But when you look at that group, you think, are USA better than Wales? Are Iran better than Wales? Okay, England obviously better. They've got far bigger talent pool. And, if we get a draw out of that game, I think any Wales fan would bite your hand off. But you would like to think we could get 4 points, maybe even 6 out of that first 2 games and have a good chance of getting through. So I'm sort of torn between that bracket of enjoy the ride and also we've been to back-to-back Euros. We should be competing now. So realistically, I think if we get through and lose last 16, I think that's about where we should be aiming for, and it's probably about on par, especially if we played the Netherlands in the last 16. Going out in the groups would be disappointing, but heck, we've been in the World Cup, so bit of both really, Guto.
Oh, Joe, the World Cup's too far away for me to get too excited about it. I need to keep my feet on the floor. We'll have to wait for the Swans to get us excited before that. But thank you very much, Mitch, for joining us. Thanks to Steve, as always, and thank you for listening to us. Hopefully we've got you in the mood for the season, and hopefully the Swans will keep those moods high with a win against Rotherham on Saturday. Hopefully we'll be back next week to review the game. But until then, thank you very much for listening.